Hello again, my name's John and welcome to my third video on cheese making. This time I'm going to have a go at making a blue Stilton style cheese. In the last video I said I was going to make a cheddar cheese next, but I would really like to get this blue Stilton one out the way first. But I promise I'll make the cheddar next time. If you fancy having a go at making this cheese, here is a list of all the ingredients that you'll need. Okay, let's have a look at all the equipment that we'll need to make this wonderful cheese. A large double boiler, a good thermometer, a slotted spoon for stirring and straining, timer, a 1 kilogram cheese mould, a couple of cheese or sushi mats, 2 cheesecloths, a large stainless steel mixing bowl, a colander that will fit inside the bowl, rubber gloves, a couple of cheese or chopping boards, a 4 kilogram brick, and 1 number 10 knitting needle. The first step, as usual in making cheese, is to sterilise all the equipment. Most of it can be boiled for 15 minutes. Anything that won't fit in the pan can be washed using a detergent, then sanitised with a mild bleach solution or with some other sanitising product. All your worktops, sinks must also be germ free. I also use white vinegar to keep any unwanted mould down. Time to add the milk. I'll start by pouring all 16 pints, that's 2 imperial gallons of full cream or whole milk, into the pan. Now, because Stilton type cheese is very creamy, we need to add extra cream, so I'm going to add 500 ml of double cream into the recipe. Now at this stage we need to add the ingredient that makes the blue-green veins in the cheese. This is a fungus called Penicillium roqueforti, and it has been used in making blue cheeses for hundreds of years. Only a tiny amount is needed, about 1 gram. Just sprinkle it over the top of the milk and let it sit there for a couple of minutes. Then stir it thoroughly for a further minute. It is important to make sure that it's spread equally throughout the milk. And once that's done, we can get on with heating up the milk. Right, we now need to heat up the milk to a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius, that's 86 degrees Fahrenheit. The pan is now in the double boiler with the heat on low, and with the thermometer in the pan we now wait for the temperature to rise, stirring occasionally to disperse the heat. Once the temperature has been reached, we can take it off the heat and add the culture. Okay, the thermometer is at 30 degrees, so we turn off the heat and take the pan off the boiler. The temperature should stay steady now for a couple of hours. Now it's time to add the culture. In this case it's called a mesophilic type B culture. Just the same as I did with the roqueforti, just sprinkle it over the milk and let it sit for 2 minutes to rehydrate, and then stir it for a further minute. At this point I'd like to give those nice folks down at Goat Nutrition a mention. This is where I buy most of my cheese making ingredients and equipment. They have everything you would possibly need to get started in cheese making. I'll put a link in the description for the UK and Europe and the USA sites. Once it's well mixed, put the lid on the pan and set the timer away for 30 minutes to let the culture do its work. Okay, the 30 minutes is up and now it's time to add the half teaspoon of rennet, which has been diluted in a quarter cup of unchlorinated water. You can use shop-bought bottled water for this. Tap water is no good because of the chlorine that's in it. It's best to get the milk moving first, then add the rennet while stirring. Once the rennet is in, it has to be stirred for a good 2 minutes to make sure it's mixed in thoroughly. After the stirring is done, it doesn't hurt to check the temperature at this point, just to make sure it hasn't dropped. If it has, put it back on the double boiler and get it back to 30 Celsius. Mine is holding at 30, so now I put the lid on and set the timer for 90 minutes. Then we'll come back and check for a set. Okay, the 90 minutes is up and we now check to see if the milk has set. I take my curd cutting knife and just dip in the end and pull it out a couple of times. If it comes out clean, then this stage is complete and the milk is set. If it doesn't come out clean, then put the lid back on and give it some more time. In my case, the knife is coming out clean, so it has set and is ready now for the next stage. And the next step is to put a large pan with a couple of inches of hot water in the sink and then put the mixing bowl on. Now put the colander in the bowl and line the colander with a cheesecloth. What we have to do now is to spoon the uncut curds into the cheesecloth. So with the slotted spoon, gently lift the curds and transfer them into the colander. This step takes a while. The hot water in the pan will keep the curds from cooling down. The idea is to create a bath for the curds to sit in, but maintaining the temperature of 30 degrees throughout this stage. Once the curds have been moved into the colander, we have to let them sit in the weir bath for an hour and a half. So set the timer for 90 minutes, but keep an eye on the temperature. If it starts to cool down, just put the bowl back on the pan of hot water, checking the thermometer all the time. Okay, the 90 minutes are up, and the next step is to hang the curds so that the whey can drain off. Find the four corners of the cheesecloth and tie the opposite ends together. I'm not sure if the whey can be used for anything else with the Rock 40 mould being in it. I just normally discard it. There's loads of ways you can suspend this bundle of curds. I like to use a couple of chairs with a brush shank pushed through the cloth. Then the bowl can sit on the seat to catch the whey until it stops dripping. This could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. I normally check after half an hour. Once the dripping has just about stopped, it's time to move on to the next stage. Okay, once the dripping has stopped, it's time to lightly press the curds to squeeze out a bit more whey. So we put the first of the chopping boards on the drainer and put the bundle of curds on top of that. I like to open the cloth and spread them out a bit to make the curds a bit flatter. I should have had my rubber gloves on while doing this step, but I forgot to put them on. But both my hands have been sterilised with white vinegar before I started. Once the curds have been spread out a bit, I cover them with another cheesecloth, then sandwich the curds with the other chopping board. Now, in the dairies where they make the original Stilton cheese in vast amounts, they don't need to do this step, simply because they put 11 kilograms of curds into their large moulds, and the whey is expelled under its own weight. But with our relatively small amount of curds, it needs a little help, and that's where the 4 kilogram brick comes into it. Well, it was just under 4 kilograms, so I had to add a cup of water to make up the weight. You don't have to use a brick, A 4 litre milk bottle filled with water is about the right weight. By the way, I did sterilise the brick by submerging it in a bucket of water with a little bleach. Now that's all set up, we leave this for 12 hours, so I'll be back then to start the next step, which is milling the curds ready to go into the mould. Okay, the 12 hours have passed and that's the pressing stage out of the way. I'll just remove the brick and the top board and see what we have. As you can see, the curds are a lot more compact. I'll just peel off the cheesecloth and see what the consistency's like. It still feels moist and creamy, which is just what you want for this type of cheese. Now the next step is to mill the curds. That just means break it up into small pieces. This has to be done gently or you could end up with a pile of sticky mush. Once the whole lot has been milled, I'll add the 2 tablespoons of salt in 2 goes. This ensures that the salt is evenly spread throughout the cheese. The milling takes a while, so I'll speed this up a bit. Okay, that's the milling done. Now we're getting close to the end. What we need to do now is get the curds into the mould. So I've lined the 1 kilogram mould with a sterilised cheesecloth, and the easiest way is to gently transfer it by hand a bit at a time, pressing it down as we go, but not using too much pressure. Once it's full, tidy up the cheesecloth ends and put it on a cheese mat, or in my case a sushi mat, and put another mat on the top. Store this at room temperature for 4 days, turning the whole lot, mats as well, 4 times a day. It will shrink a little over the 4 days as it dries out, and the green mould will start to show on the outside of the cheese. Okay, I had to wait 4 days, but you only have to wait 4 seconds. As you can see, the cheese has shrunk a bit and you can clearly see the green mould has started to form. As it ages, this mould will turn into a hard protective skin covering the whole cheese. So peel back the cheesecloth very carefully, because at this stage the cheese is still pretty soft and would easily break. Once the cloth is safely off, we can start what the professionals call rubbing up. This means taking a flat blade knife and lightly smoothing out all the nooks and crannies. It's easier to show you this step rather than try to explain it. It takes a while, in fact it took me about 20 minutes to do this, so I'll speed up the video. Okay, now that's done, the cheese looks a lot smoother. Now you find out what the knitting needle's for. To get the blue veins running through the cheese, the Roquefort mould has to have oxygen to form. And to do that, all we have to do is to stick holes in the cheese with the knitting needle, and that allows air to enter so the mould can start working inside the cheese. I normally put the holes about 1 inch apart, starting at about ½ an inch in from the edge and working towards the centre. Then flip the cheese over and do the same at the other end. I also poke a few holes through the side too. And now it's time to prepare a container to keep it in. I put a cheese mat doubled up in the bottom so that it's not sitting in any moisture that might leak out of the cheese. I put a lid loosely across the top so I can breathe. Once that's done, it goes in my cheese fridge at a temperature of 13 degrees Celsius, that's 55 degrees Fahrenheit, for 12 weeks, turning it every day for the first week, then once a week for the remaining 11. Now with the cheese finished and ready to age, we can move on to one I made just over 12 weeks ago. So let's have a look and see how that one turned out. Right, as you can see, it has that hard protective coat on it that I mentioned. There is a couple of spots of white mould on the end, but that's fine, that won't do you any harm. Now it's time to cut down the middle and see what it looks like on the inside. As you can see, it has a nice creamy colour. It has the blue lines running through it from the needle. It smells like any other blue cheese. Now for the big test. The texture is not as crumbly as some blue cheeses. It seems a little firmer but still soft and moist. So let's try a little on a piece of Melba toast. Here we go. It's taken 3 months. Has it been worth it? And I have to say, it is absolutely delicious. It really is. Just a nice clean sharp taste and not too salty like some other blue cheeses are. Doesn't have that bitter aftertaste that some Stiltons have. It's just a wonderful, creamy, very pleasant flavour, and I'm very pleased with it. Well, there you go. That's how I make my blue cheese at home. Some people might say, is it worth it? Why not just go to the shops and buy some? But I think it's a great hobby and very satisfying and enjoyable to create something like this at home. And I honestly think it tastes better than any blue cheese I've ever bought. Stilton is known as a Christmas cheese, so if you start around the 3rd week in September, it should be ready for the big day. Is it worth it? It certainly is to me. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button, comment and hit the like icon. Right, that's it for now, so goodbye and thanks again for watching.